Why siblings fight and what now? Parents who put these principles into practice have had great success. One mother came to me with twins, 2.5 years old and a 6-month-old, all in the back of the car, and a daily fight broke out over which twin was allowed to be in the middle that day. What she observed was that the more extroverted child seemed to be winning over the more introverted, and she didn't like that her more introverted child was starting to give in. After we worked together, this mom said that there was no more fighting in the car, and it was such a relief. In this part 3, you will hear about the crux of comparing children with each other and what if one of your children always wants to win. At the end, Elaine shares the number one ingredient that we all need in order to be able to handle life and stay mentally healthy. My name is Annette, and I created this Effortless Parenting podcast because I believe that you deserve a calmer home. I guide parents to embrace boundaries with strong-willed and highly sensitive children so they still feel loved and can cherish a bond for life. Enjoy the show. My personal example is I was the middle child. I was labeled the problem child. And so I grew up with this whole, oh, I'm such a victim, don't have the benefits of the eldest and not spoiled like the youngest, until I sat down with my siblings in my 30s and we all allowed each other to say what it was like from our perspective. And it was fascinating to change my perspective and snap out of I'm the victim here and I never got the attention that the others got, And speaking of attention, I could speak with you all day about this, Elaine. So much more comes up when we speak. I'd love to explore a little bit of there's so many challenges parents have when children fight, and we have one good idea of why children fight. And I say a lot that it's not, as a parent, our job isn't really to force our children, they have to love each other, but we can do a lot that they respect each other. And I would love your thoughts on that, how it maybe worked in your own family, or how you work with parents who have these challenges.
Yes, it's interesting because coming back to Dreyfus and Adler, is their suggestion, if you like, their teaching us is to not intervene. Let the children manage it for themselves. Right. Because if as a parent we intervene, there will be one who might feel vindicated and the other who feels it's not fair. So letting the children find their own level. And obviously we don't want them to kill each other or hurt each other, but really it's a question of, but also teaching them, like you did with your siblings. That was so wonderful and took so much courage. Let's look at this. Let's see what's happening here. What is this fight really about? It's not that you're not allowed to fight, but we need to understand what the goal of the fighting is.
Wow.
So do you want to be the boss? Do you want to not be the youngest? Or do you want to get more attention because you think the youngest gets more attention? So it's really understanding those mistaken goals, Stryker's phrase, those mistaken goals. Right. In everything we do is goal directed.
Yes.
And Adler understood that. We have a purpose for everything. So can you resolve your dispute without fighting? How can we resolve this? Let's help each other. How can we do this as a parent? So what are you looking for? Do you feel, oh, well, I think you hate me, mum, or whoever, you're always giving him what he wants and you never give me, that always never stuff. Yeah. Is that really true? Okay, let's talk about it. Come on, give me an example of when you got some good attention. Give me an example of when you didn't get good attention. Let's see how we can resolve it. So it's about really, and that's one way to teach respect, I think, is to recognize that the other also has a point and accept that.
Right. That empathy, isn't it? To want to hear. And Riker's always said, but not in the heat of the moment, right?
Yes.
What he calls making time for training has to come at a very different time, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Walk away. Let them get on with it.
Yeah.
as I say, as long as they don't get the carving knives out and attack each other, then let them get on with it, you know?
Yeah.
And because we, whatever we do as a parent in that situation, it's going to feel to the child that we might favor one or the other. So, but also they have to come to their level. They have to come work with their dynamic and figure it out. And yes, so then you can't reason in the moment. You just absolutely can't.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this when everybody's a bit quieter, when everybody's calm, you know. Or let's talk about this when you're not fighting. Let's sit down. Let's make a time where we can sit down and talk about this. The family meeting, absolutely crucial, so important. So let's talk about this in a family meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the meantime, let's agree that we're not going to actually fight. We just might say a couple of words or be able to say how we feel, but we're not going to fight about it. And again, just thinking on the priority behaviors will come into it. Does a child want to be better than? Does a child want to win? Does a child want to please and feel that he's being rejected, he or she? Does a child want to avoid stress?
Right. That's right.
So and what's the competition between siblings? How do they compete? There's a really lovely book by Calvin Armerding.
I'm going to put that down. They're Adlerians as well, right?
Yes, called The Cooperative Family.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful book, well worth reading. So it's about many different types of competition in families. So competition between siblings. How do we compete with each other? So, for example, if I was actually quite bright academically, so how did my siblings compete? They didn't. They didn't.
Yeah.
But not till later. When they were older, they did, but not at school. They just, I don't know what they thought, if they thought they needed to catch up or they just weren't interested. I don't know, actually. We haven't really talked about that, but I noticed it. So competition between siblings, competition between parents. How do the two parents compete? Whose needs come first? You know, it's wonderful. Competition between oh gosh, there's several chapters, lots of chapters that are really, really worth looking in terms of parenting. So how did you compete with your own siblings? How do my children compete with each other? What are they looking for? How can we resolve that competition? How can we turn it into cooperation? And the same thing with parents, you know. You might have a very strict parent who has lots of rules. It can only be like this, and then they might be with someone who's going, oh, come on, let them be, they're fine. So who wins? Who becomes the dominant parent? Is it the one with the rules, or is it the one with the laissez-faire attitude? It's just amazing. So a book well worth reading, and it's got lots of case studies, and it's really, really helpful. Finding horizontal relationships rather than inferiority, superiority.
For those who haven't heard this, maybe in a different video on my channel, would you maybe, as a final thing, and we could talk all day, and maybe just explain a little bit what Adler meant by that, vertical and horizontal relationships?
Yeah, well, vertical. So Adler understood that we, from the very beginning in our lives, we strive to move away from inferiority feelings. And the direction of travel is towards superiority. So he calls it, I don't know if Adler called it or other Adlerians coming after called it the greasy pole, the slippery pole. It's very hard to do that climb up because we slip back again.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah? So that slippery pole is really interesting. So how do we find, some people don't like the word superiority. Some people call it significance, which is a good word, but it softens it, I think. So how do we move away from inferiority to superiority? And the healthy relationship is not vertical, not between superiority and inferiority, it's horizontal. That we're all on the same plane, we're all on the same level. That's where we can relate to each other without going up and down all the time.
That's right.
And also just a very quick thing on inferiority in terms of it's a central part of Adler's theory, actually, that humans are born inferior. We have a sense even as babies, of our own inferiority. If you look at nature, most animals in nature can function from the minute they're born. Most, not all, but most. Okay? Human babies can't do anything much for themselves until they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then they begin to be able to dress themselves, they learn, but they still can't live on their own. They can't go and hunt. They can't find food in the shrubs. They might learn about plants, but do you see what I mean? Whereas in the animal world, I live in Wales surrounded by sheep. Yeah. The lambs are born and they shake themselves off and they're off. And yes, they have their mother's milk, but they also can jump and run and play. And and if you watch any animal being born, most animals, not all, certainly not the ape families, but a lot of animals just get up and get on with it, whereas humans can't. It's not that they don't, but they can't. So that inferiority, Adler believed, was built in.
Okay.
And again, when you come to birth order, as that little second child, you might look at your older sibling and think, well, they can walk and talk and run, and I can't. I can just sit here and wait for someone to change my nappy, and I can go goo goo, or I can cry, and I can smile, and I can create relationships in that way by looking at facial expressions of my parent and my mother. It's, again, that's a whole massive other topic. There's been lots of research on how mother and child and father and child develop their bond. A lot of it through facial expressions and through hearing and reproducing what they hear.
Right.
So there's a whole other.
It's a whole other hour, Elaine. Yeah. And isn't it so interesting? Like from that second born perspective, and this is what my sister shared with me. How I wanted to share a bit of vulnerability here. Like I wanted to be so much like her. When I was a young teenager, I stole her socks and put them on so I could be a bit more like this older sister who was like my hero, and how annoyed she was, and this whole inferiority. And I think one big takeaway is this whole comparing. Especially we were girls, we were compared a lot to each other, So then to a firstborn, I'm just trying right now while I'm saying this, trying to see it from her perspective. If an older, maybe daughter is compared to one who's 5 years younger, like that difference, how does that firstborn feel? And the secondborn, like you said, my sister could do everything 5 years before me, and to watch that and be compared to that, it's very, very hard for both, not only the younger sibling, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think of that idea of running to catch up, snapping at, the younger one snapping at my heels as the eldest, and then the older one, I'm not in that position. I never have been, actually, as the first child in my family, the first grandchild. So, I've always been one at the end point, if you like. But having people snapping at your heels, I remember that infuriated me as a child, as a young person and a child, having to look after, I could go on, I have so many examples, but having to look after and babysit the younger ones when I wanted to have my life, and I was tethered to these young children, and I really didn't want that role.
Yes.
Where am I? And I did, one thing my parents did do for me was that I always had my own room. I never had to share a room. My two sisters shared a room, but I didn't. So they recognized something there about, you need your own space, which I really appreciated, actually.
A privilege of the eldest. Yes.
Yes, but we were always taught to share and share alike, and that's one of my difficulties in my current relationship. My husband was an only,
right,
and so he doesn't know how to share. So we have, I can divide things into 5 because I was the eldest. If I can divide a cake into 5 equal portions, and if he has something to divide into 2, there's always a slightly bigger portion, which he takes. It drives me insane. We've been together 47 years, and it still makes me want to scream. They're not the same. They're not equal.
That reminds me, and we did this yesterday. We made this Austrian dish, my son and myself, for the family, called Kaiserschmarrn. It's something that do you know this dish?
I know No, I
No.
don't actually know.
It translates as the emperor's nonsense. It's completely out of off topic, but it was very funny. But we made this together. It's a bit like pancake, but different. And what we do in an activity in positive discipline is that we say if there are siblings and they don't want to share, and a lot of people know this now, but it works so well. Maybe try it with Matthew. We say one cuts or divides it and the other one chooses, and we've been doing this since they were young and it works so well.
I might try that.
Yes.
Oh,
So
it's just so funny. Yeah.
To wrap it up, if I absolutely love our chat, Elaine, and we would welcome all comments on the topic. I mean, there's so much to talk about, to maybe expand it for in the summer or later in the year, if anyone is interested in maybe exploring Adler's teachings a bit more, you had this word of, if somebody maybe is a psychotherapist already and they try to, how did you say, to like a
conversion. Well, we call it a conversion course. So it's not that we're trying to convert people into Adlerians.
No,
we want them to be able to convert some of their skills, to learn about Adlerian skills, which can be incredibly useful, because there are many approaches out there who look at early childhood, but not in this way.
Yes,
they just look at early childhood. What was it like for you? But they don't look at the dynamics and the interactions. And there's lots of work around early memories, around dreams, around various therapeutic concepts that are Adlerian that don't exist anywhere else. So it's a very useful course, very interesting course. But also complete beginners will I know gain something from it. So this is the online course. I think I said 3rd of March. Is that the date I gave?
I wrote 3rd of March, and you said you had a Facebook link. I might link it below, and we'll have a chat offline if I maybe add your email address or whatever way people can reach out if they have questions to take part. And there's an introduction to Adlerian psychology coming up, right, as well.
And that is the course that I'm talking about.
That is the same. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. And anything else you would like to share before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think I'm aware of my tendency to ramble and go off on tangents, but I think it's all one theory. It's a unified theory, so it all links in. So apologies if you're thinking, where is she going now? What is she talking about? But I'm hoping that you'll see how it all kind of fits together.
And I think you mentioned her sometimes, Betty Lou Bettner. You're familiar with her as well, right? And she explains the Adlerian approach and holism, like the pieces of the jigsaw. Are you familiar with this analogy? Yeah. And especially when it comes to how much our children, they need to contribute, is if they don't have that, then it's almost like a piece missing of the jigsaw, and we need everything to be the whole picture. I love that. It's such a simple way and yet deep to explain Adler and what he meant. And this whole moving one, let's say you have the complete jigsaw and moving one piece, how that impacts the whole, right?
That's absolutely that holism is really, I mean, again, we could do a week on Adlerian theory.
Holism its own,
But what Betty Lou Bettner talks about, Adler described as social interest. So that's Adler's fundamental notion, fundamental understanding of mental health is social interest, which is about contribution, how we contribute to our group, to our family, to our relationship with one another, to our community, to our work, to the world, and to ourselves. So that the idea of social interest, Gemeinschaftsgefühl in German, the feeling of togetherness, the feeling of belonging, contribution. There isn't one word for that in English, but it's quite a big word. So that's the fundamental part of all of this. From when we're born is to understand how we contribute and how we belong. And then we feel we can handle life.
That's it. And isn't it, did you say this to me that we cannot kind of determine someone's mental health based on their interest in the social interest of others, right?
Yes, yes. And it's a bit like a kind of figure of eight. How does if I feel, say, for example, depressed, if I feel depressed, I'm not really interested in getting out there. I'm not interested in contributing. I'm really self-focused. I'm really discouraged. I'm really not wanting to. So does that come first, or does the fact that I've isolated myself because of maybe circumstances at work or in the family contribute to my feeling depressed? So either way, the lack of wanting to become to be a contributing member of the group, of society, of the world, damages our mental health.
Yeah.
Or if our mental health is already damaged, we find it difficult to contribute. So it goes in both directions.
And that
what we see
one.
Sorry, I was just going to say, what we see through therapy is that social interest increasing.
Yeah, I think everyone who's done therapy can attribute to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to go rambling on now about how I grew up in a system that kind of, it doesn't mean either that our own individual needs don't matter anymore, and it's all about the greater good, because that doesn't work. But like you said throughout our conversation, it's all about relationship, being in relationship with the other and ourselves, right? And this finding this golden balance. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much, Elaine. I'm going to leave it here, and we'll invite the viewer to comment and ask questions, and maybe start a next conversation on a different topic. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been really...
Thank you for watching this birth order series to the end. If you enjoyed my conversation with Elaine and heard her say in part 1 how finding the teachings of Alfred Adler gave her this feeling of coming home, I highly recommend watching this next video here that I'm going to leave up here, where my mentor Deborah Owen-Sohaki goes into more depth about Alfred Adler's inferiority complex, inferiority feelings, and how they're all part of life. And I think every parent needs to know. My own learning was how when we all come across stumbling blocks, we get to decide, will I overcompensate, will I undercompensate, or will I just strive for growth and improvement at all times? And all of them are rooted in these feelings of inferiority, and nobody is any better than anyone else. And we live and strive for these horizontal relationships. Enjoy, and thank you for watching.